No one could touch the feral dragon hatchlings until they smelled a human mechanic's lunch. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Across the vastness of Galactic Station Nexus 7, the desperate cries of untamable dragon hatchlings echoed through the xenobiological containment sector as the human mechanic Miles Harper approached with nothing but his toolbox and a simple sandwich. The Galactic Station Nexus 7 hung like a massive geometric jewel against the backdrop of swirling nebula clouds, its crystalline spires and metal frameworks housing the Interstellar Alliance's premier xenobiological research facility. The station orbited the neutral zone between three major galactic powers, the methodical Vanadians, the hive-minded Zorati, and the militaristic Corvan Empire. For centuries, these species had maintained an uneasy peace through scientific collaboration rather than warfare, with Nexus 7 serving as their crowning achievement. Deep within the station's specialized containment sector, Dr. Zalara Voss, the station's lead xenobiologist, pressed her scaled blue hand against the reinforced observation window. Her four amber eyes narrowed in frustration as she watched the scene unfolding within the habitat chamber. 6 Pyrelian dragon hatchlings, each about the size of a Terran house cat, but infinitely more dangerous, darted around the specially designed environment, their iridescent scales flashing under the artificial sunlight. Their tiny wings, still undeveloped for flight, fluttered in agitation as they hissed and spat miniature flames at the robotic feeding arms attempting to place nutrient packs into their enclosure. Increase the sedation vapor by 15%, Dr. Voss instructed her assistant, a tall insectoid Zorati named Tix, whose compound eyes reflected the multiple holographic displays surrounding them. Doctor, we're already at maximum safe dosage, Tix responded, his mandibles clicking in concern. Any higher concentration could permanently damage their respiratory systems. Voss made a frustrated clicking sound with her throat, the Vanadian equivalent of a sigh. These hatchlings have been here for 3 weeks, and we've made zero progress. They won't eat, won't respond to any form of contact, and their bioreadings show dangerously elevated stress levels. She turned toward the gathering of scientists and station administrators behind her. If we can't stabilize them soon, we'll lose the entire clutch. Station Director Carvin, an imposing Corvan warrior whose graying fur and cybernetic eyes spoke of a long military career before entering administration, stepped forward. His voice was a gravelly rumble that filled the observation room. The diplomatic implications would be severe. The Pyrelian matriarchs entrusted these eggs to our care as a gesture of goodwill. Their extinction would not only be a scientific tragedy, but could jeopardize our fragile relations with the Pyrelian Dominion. We've tried everything, Dr. Voss insisted. Automated care systems, holographic projections of adult Pyrelians, even bringing in specialists from 12 different worlds. She gestured toward the hatchlings, where one particularly aggressive specimen was currently attempting to burn through a feeding tube with its flame breath. These creatures are feral. They hatched prematurely when their transport vessel malfunctioned, and without the proper imprinting sequence, they recognized nothing as safe or familiar. Perhaps, suggested Tix, we should consider requesting a Pyrelian handler. Director Carvin's jaw tightened. Impossible. The nearest Pyrelian world is 6 weeks away at maximum FTL. These hatchlings will starve within days without intervention. Besides, the matriarchs were explicitly clear. This is a test of our capability as potential allies. A moment of tense silence fell over the room as the assembled experts contemplated their limited options. The Pyrelian dragons were legendary throughout the galaxy, intelligent, powerful creatures that bonded for life with their handlers. Adults could grow to the size of small starships, live for millennia, and possess telekinetic abilities along with their famous flame breath. An alliance with the Pyrelian Dominion would shift the balance of power dramatically for whoever secured it. The silence was broken by the soft hiss of the observation room door sliding open. A human male stepped through, dressed in the gray jumpsuit of the station's maintenance crew. Toolbox in hand, he glanced around at the assembled aliens with a slightly embarrassed expression. Sorry to interrupt, he said, lifting a small tablet. Got a work order to fix the environmental regulator in this sector. System says it's running hot. Director Carvin barely glanced at the human. This is a restricted area during an emergency situation. Maintenance can wait. The human, Miles Harper according to his name badge, didn't immediately leave. Instead, his eyes had found the observation window and the dragon hatchlings beyond. A look of wonder crossed his face. "Are those dragons?" he asked, stepping closer to the window despite the director's dismissal. Dr. Voss, irritated by the interruption but too polite to show it, nodded curtly. "Pyrillian dragonoids, yes. Extremely rare and currently in critical condition." Miles watched as one of the hatchlings shot a perfect ring of fire at a robotic arm, then rolled away with surprising agility. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "What's wrong with them?" Before anyone could answer or dismiss him, a sharp beeping sound came from Miles' pocket. He pulled out a small device and looked at it apologetically. "Sorry, lunch break alarm. I'll come back later to fix that regulator." As he turned to leave, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in some kind of foil. The moment he unwrapped it, the observation room filled with a strong, savory aroma that made several of the alien scientists recoil. But through the observation window, something extraordinary happened. All 6 dragon hatchlings suddenly froze. Their narrow, serpentine heads lifted simultaneously, nostrils flaring. Then, as one, they rushed toward the window, pressing against it and staring directly at Miles, or more specifically, at his sandwich. "By the cosmic void," whispered Tix, mandibles clicking rapidly in excitement. Dr. Voss stepped closer to the window, her 4 eyes wide with shock. "They're responding," she said in disbelief. "For the first time since hatching, they're actually showing interest in something other than destruction." Director Carvin's cybernetic eye whirred as he focused on the human and his food. "What is that substance you're holding, maintenance worker?" Miles, startled by suddenly being the center of attention, looked down at his sandwich. "This? Just lunch. Grilled cheese sandwich with a bit of spicy mustard and sliced ham. Nothing fancy." "It appears," said Dr. Voss slowly, her scientific mind rapidly processing this unexpected development, "that the hatchlings are intensely interested in your food, human." Miles looked from his sandwich to the tiny dragons pressing themselves against the glass, their eyes fixed on his lunch with almost hypnotic intensity. For the first time, they weren't spitting fire or thrashing about. They were utterly still, focused, and seemingly entranced. Director Carvin turned to Dr. Voss. "Is this significant?" "Significant." Dr. Voss let out a short, sharp laugh. "Director, these hatchlings have rejected every form of sustenance we've offered. They've shown no response to any stimulus except aggression. And now," she gestured toward the window where the hatchlings remained transfixed. "This is unprecedented." A thoughtful expression crossed Director Carvin's face as he studied Miles with new interest. "What is your name and position, human?" "Miles Harper, sir. Station mechanic, level 3 clearance, specializing in environmental systems and habitat maintenance." He shifted uncomfortably under the director's intense gaze. "Been stationed here about 8 months." Director Carvin exchanged a look with Dr. Voss, some silent communication passing between them. After a moment, the director spoke again, his tone carefully measured. "Mr. Harper, how would you feel about assisting us with a rather unique situation?" Miles glanced from the intimidating Corvin director to the desperate faces of the scientific team, then back to the small dragons still staring at him through the glass. One of them, a hatchling with striking emerald scales, placed a tiny clawed foot against the window as if reaching for him. "I'm just a mechanic, sir," Miles said hesitantly. "Not sure how I could help with." He gestured toward the hatchlings. "Whatever this is." Dr. Voss stepped forward, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Sometimes, Mr. Harper, the most remarkable scientific breakthroughs come from the most unexpected sources." She pointed to his sandwich. "Those hatchlings are dying because they refuse to eat. They've rejected everything we've offered them, but they seem fascinated by whatever you're holding." Miles looked down at his simple lunch. "It's just a sandwich." "Perhaps to you," said Tix, his antennae quivering with excitement. "But to them, it might be the first thing that's triggered a positive response since they hatched." Director Carvin straightened to his full, imposing height. Mr. Harper, I am temporarily reassigning you to the Xenobiology department as a special consultant. Your maintenance duties will be covered by another technician. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Miles blinked in surprise. Sir, I don't know anything about dragons or xenobiology. I fix environmental systems and repair habitat enclosures. Which means you understand the technical aspects of their living environment better than most of our scientists, Dr. Voss pointed out. And for whatever reason, these hatchlings are responding to you, or at least to your food. That makes you uniquely qualified at this moment. Miles looked again at the window where the tiny dragons remained fixated, their previous feral behavior temporarily suspended. The emerald-scaled one was now pawing gently at the glass, making soft chirping noises. Despite his reservations, he couldn't help but feel a strange connection to these small, desperate creatures. All right, he said finally. I'll help if I can, but I still need to fix that environmental regulator. It's running too hot, and that can't be good for them either. Dr. Voss and Director Carvin exchanged another look, this time with a hint of hope. Mr. Harper, Director Carvin said, fix whatever you need to. Just don't lose that sandwich. Miles found himself ushered into a preparation room adjacent to the hatchling's habitat. Dr. Voss and Tix hovered around him as he was fitted with a protective suit designed to shield him from both the hatchling's flames and their razor-sharp claws. The lightweight material felt strange against his skin, some kind of advanced polymer that was supposedly stronger than steel while remaining flexible. The suit will protect you from minor flame bursts and scratches, Dr. Voss explained as she adjusted the helmet seal. But I must emphasize that despite their small size, these creatures are extremely dangerous. Their fire can reach temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, and their bite force can crush bone. Miles swallowed nervously. That's reassuring. Tix was carefully packaging Miles' sandwich into a specialized container. We've analyzed your food item and identified the key aromatic compounds. Fascinating mixture of dairy proteins, wheat carbohydrates, and preserved meat products. The mustard contains particularly potent sulfur compounds that might be triggering their olfactory response. It's just a grilled cheese with ham and mustard, Miles repeated, bemused by the scientific breakdown of his lunch. My mom used to make them for me when I was a kid. Sometimes the simplest things hold the greatest power, Dr. Voss said, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep thought among Vanadians. The hatchlings were transported in stasis, and their premature awakening likely created a form of sensory confusion. They've been rejecting our scientifically formulated nutrient solutions, but perhaps... She trailed off, lost in thought. Perhaps they need something real, Miles suggested. Something with a strong smell and taste. Not just nutrients. Dr. Voss looked at him with new interest. Yes, exactly. We've been approaching this as a purely biological problem, providing optimal nutrition in the most efficient form. But we failed to consider the sensory and psychological components of feeding. Director Carvin entered the preparation room, his massive frame filling the doorway. The observation team is ready. We'll be monitoring every second, and emergency protocols are in place if anything goes wrong. He fixed Miles with a stern look. Your primary objective is to establish some form of non-aggressive contact with the hatchlings. If they respond to the food, try to get them to actually consume something. And if they decide I look tastier than the sandwich? Miles asked, only half joking. The habitat has emergency suppressant systems, Tix assured him, though his mandibles clicked nervously. And the suit is fire-resistant for brief exposures. Miles nodded, taking a deep breath as he secured the last of his protective gear. Through the preparation room window, he could see the hatchlings still gathered at the observation glass, waiting expectantly. The emerald-scaled one seemed to be watching him directly, its intelligent eyes tracking his movements. One last thing, Dr. Voss said, handing him a small device. This is a neural translator. It won't give you direct communication with the hatchlings. They're too young for complex language, but it might help you interpret their basic emotional states and intentions. Miles secured the device behind his ear. All right then, I guess it's time to meet the dragons. The airlock to the habitat cycled open with a soft hiss. Miles stepped through cautiously, the specialized container holding his sandwich clutched in one gloved hand, his toolbox in the other. The habitat beyond was an impressive recreation of what he assumed was a Pyrillian landscape. Rocky formations interspersed with patches of strange, reddish vegetation and small pools of bubbling liquid that wasn't quite water. The moment he entered, all 6 hatchlings disappeared from the observation window and scattered to hiding places throughout the habitat. Miles stood still, uncertain how to proceed. "They're frightened," came Dr. Voss's voice through his helmet. "Calm, move slowly, and try to appear non-threatening." Miles set his toolbox down gently and moved toward the center of the habitat, where a flat rock formation created a natural platform. He knelt down, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. "Hey there," he said softly, though he doubted the dragons could understand him. "I hear you guys aren't eating. That's not good. I brought something you might like better." He carefully opened the container, allowing the aroma of his sandwich to fill the air. Almost immediately, he noticed movement from behind various rocks and vegetation clusters. Tiny heads peeked out, nostrils flaring as they caught the scent. The neural translator at his ear gave a soft ping, then translated, "Curiosity, hunger, caution." "That's right," Miles encouraged, breaking off a small piece of the sandwich and placing it on the rock in front of him. "It's food. Real food. Probably not what you're used to, but it's got to be better than not eating at all." Slowly, one of the hatchlings emerged from hiding, the one with emerald scales that had seemed most interested through the observation window. It approached with a low, undulating movement, its body close to the ground in a defensive posture. When it was about 2 meters away, it stopped, sniffing the air intently. Hunger, suspicion, assessment. "It's okay," Miles said, keeping his voice low and gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." The emerald hatchling took another cautious step forward, then another. Its eyes never left Miles as it approached the piece of sandwich. When it was close enough, it stretched its neck out, sniffing the food directly. Then, with surprising speed, it snatched the morsel and retreated several meters, watching Miles as it cautiously tasted the food. Through the calm, Miles could hear excited murmuring from the observation room. "It's eating." Tix's voice came through, mandibles clicking in excitement. First solid food intake since hatching. The emerald hatchling seemed to consider the taste for a moment, then quickly devoured the rest of the piece. The translator pinged, satisfaction, surprise, want. Encouraged, Miles broke off another small piece and placed it on the rock. This time, the emerald hatchling approached more quickly, though still with caution. And behind it, another hatchling, this one with scales the deep blue of an earth ocean, ventured cautiously from hiding. "Look at that," Miles said quietly. "Your friend wants some too." Over the next 20 minutes, Miles continued this process, breaking off small pieces of his sandwich and placing them on the rock. One by one, the hatchlings emerged, each approaching to claim a morsel before retreating to a safe distance to eat. By the time half his sandwich was gone, all 6 hatchlings were visible, watching him with intense focus. "They're establishing a feeding hierarchy," Dr. Voss observed through the calm. "Notice how they're taking turns? That's sophisticated social behavior for creatures so young." Miles noticed something else too. With each round of feeding, the hatchlings were staying closer after taking their food, retreating less far each time. The emerald one, clearly the boldest of the clutch, was now sitting just a meter away, watching expectantly for the next offering. Anticipation, calculation, less fear. "I think we're making progress," Miles said, breaking off another piece. But this time, instead of placing it on the rock, he held it in his outstretched hand. "Let's see if we can take this to the next level." There was a sharp intake of breath over the calm. "Mr. Harper," Director Carvin warned, "that is not advisable." But Miles kept his hand steady, the piece of sandwich resting on his palm. The emerald hatchling stared at it, then at Miles' face, clearly assessing the risk. Desire, conflict, assessment. "It's okay," Miles said softly. "Fair trade. Food for trust." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with sudden determination, the emerald hatchling darted forward, snatched the food from Miles' hand, and leaped back, but not nearly as far this time, just half a meter away. It ate the morsel quickly, its eyes never leaving Miles. Triumph, satisfaction, reassessment. "Good job," Miles praised gently. "That wasn't so scary, was it?" In the observation room, The scientific team watched in astonished silence as this simple human mechanic accomplished what none of their advanced techniques had managed. One by one, the hatchlings were accepting food directly from his hand, each becoming progressively less fearful with each interaction. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Voss. He's establishing a rudimentary trust relationship through food association. More than that, Tix observed, antennae quivering. Look at their body language. They're beginning to exhibit pre-bonding behaviors. Director Carvin's cybernetic eye whirred as it zoomed in on the scene. How is this possible? The Pyrelians told us hatchlings only bond with members of psychically compatible species. We don't fully understand Pyrelian bonding mechanisms, Dr. Voss admitted. But this human is clearly triggering some kind of positive response. Inside the habitat, Miles had finally run out of sandwich. The hatchlings, seeming to realize this, became visibly agitated, chirping and hissing in disappointment. Frustration. Need. Confusion. Sorry, guys, Miles said, showing his empty hands. That's all I've got for now. But I promise I'll bring more tomorrow. He remembered his actual assignment and gestured toward his toolbox. Now, if you don't mind, I still need to fix that environmental regulator. It's running too hot in here, and I bet that's not helping your mood either. To the amazement of the observation team, the hatchlings didn't scatter when Miles stood and retrieved his toolbox. Instead, they watched curiously as he moved to the control panel embedded in one wall of the habitat. The emerald hatchling even followed him, staying just a couple of meters behind as Miles opened the panel and began examining the regulator's components. "Ah, here's your problem," he murmured, partly to himself and partly to his small audience. "Calibration's all wrong. No wonder you've been cranky. It's 5 degrees hotter than it should be in here." As Miles worked, he continued to talk softly, explaining what he was doing as if the hatchlings could understand. Whether they comprehended his words or not, they seemed soothed by his calm, steady voice. The emerald hatchling crept closer, watching his hands with apparent fascination as he adjusted components and replaced a faulty thermal sensor. Curiosity, interest, assessment. You like watching me work, huh? Miles glanced over his shoulder at his small audience. My dad was a mechanic too, back on Earth. Used to let me hand him tools when I was just a kid. Said I had a natural talent for fixing things. The neural translator continued to ping softly as it picked up shifts in the hatchling's emotional states. What had begun as primarily fear and suspicion was gradually transforming into curiosity and something that might almost be described as tentative acceptance. Temperature regulation should start improving right away, Miles said as he closed the panel. You'll be more comfortable in about an hour. He turned to find the emerald hatchling sitting directly behind him, much closer than before. It cocked its head to one side, studying him with intelligent eyes that seemed far too knowing for a creature so young. Evaluation. Recognition. Beginning trust. Miles felt a strange connection with the small creature, something he couldn't quite explain. Slowly, very slowly, he extended his hand, palm up, empty this time. "No food," he said softly. "Just me." From the observation room came urgent warnings. "Mr. Harper, this is extremely risky behavior," Dr. Voss cautioned. "Protective measures standing by," Director Carvin added, his tone tense. But Miles kept his hand steady, his eyes locked with the emerald hatchlings. For what seemed like an eternity, neither moved. Then, with deliberate caution, the hatchling extended its neck and lightly touched its snout to Miles' fingertips. The contact lasted only a second before the hatchling pulled back, but it sent a strange, warm sensation up Miles' arm, like a mild electric current, but somehow pleasant. The neural translator gave a more sustained ping than before. Connection. Assessment. Possibility. "Did you feel that too?" Miles whispered. In the observation room, alarms suddenly began to sound. Tix rushed to a console, his compound eyes reflecting multiple flashing displays. "Neural activity spike in both the human and the emerald hatchling," he reported urgently. "They're showing synchronized brainwave patterns." Dr. Voss pushed past him to study the readings herself. "This is impossible," she breathed. "The translator isn't just reading the hatchling's emotions. It's facilitating some kind of rudimentary psychic connection." Director Carvin stepped closer to the window, his expression a mixture of concern and wonder. By the void, he murmured. I believe we may be witnessing a Pyrillian bond formation. Miles was unaware of the commotion his simple touch had caused. All he knew was that something significant had just happened between him and this small, fierce creature with emerald scales. Something that felt important in a way he couldn't articulate. I should probably go, he said reluctantly, gathering his tools. But I'll come back tomorrow with more food, I promise. As if understanding his words, the emerald hatchling stepped back, allowing him passage to the airlock. The other 5 hatchlings had gathered at various distances, watching the interaction with evident interest. None showed the aggression or fear they had displayed before Miles' arrival. Acceptance, anticipation, waiting. In the preparation room, Miles was immediately surrounded by excited scientists, all talking at once as they helped him remove the protective suit. Extraordinary neural synchronization. First successful feeding. Potential psychic compatibility. Rudimentary bonding behavior. Director Carvin's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Harper, how do you feel? Miles considered the question as he handed over the helmet. Fine, I think. A little tired. And hungry. They ate my lunch, after all. He smiled slightly, then grew more serious. When that one touched me, the green one, I felt something strange. Like a connection of some kind. Dr. Voss and Tix exchanged meaningful looks. Mr. Harper, Dr. Voss said carefully, what you experienced may have been the beginning stages of a Pyrillian bond, a psychic connection between dragon and handler that the Pyrillians consider sacred. It's extremely rare for non-Pyrillians to achieve such a bond, and unprecedented for a species with no known psychic abilities like humans. Miles blinked in surprise. A bond? Like telepathy? Not exactly, Tix explained, mandibles working excitedly. More like an empathic link that grows stronger over time. Adult bonded pairs can share sensory experiences and emotions, though rarely coherent thoughts. The implications are significant, Director Carvin said, his tone measured but his good eye gleaming with intensity. If you are indeed compatible for bonding, it would represent a diplomatic breakthrough of extraordinary proportions. Miles shook his head, overwhelmed. I'm just a mechanic. I gave them a sandwich and fixed a temperature regulator. Sometimes, Dr. Voss said with surprising gentleness, the universe works in ways our science cannot predict. These hatchlings were dying, Mr. Harper. Now they've eaten, shown social behavior, and one has initiated preliminary bonding. Whatever the reason, you have connected with them when our most advanced techniques failed. Director Carvin straightened formally. Mr. Harper, I am officially reassigning you to the Xenobiology Department until further notice. Your primary duty will be the care and potential bonding with these hatchlings. Dr. Voss will brief you on all relevant protocols. Miles wanted to protest, but found himself thinking of the emerald hatchling and the strange, warm connection he had felt. Something about those intelligent eyes and the delicate touch of scales against his fingertips had awakened a feeling he couldn't quite name, a mixture of protectiveness, wonder, and recognition. All right, he said finally, but I'll need more sandwiches. Over the next week, Miles spent every day with the dragon hatchlings, gradually earning their trust through a combination of food, patience, and his natural calm demeanor. Each morning, he arrived with a variety of sandwiches prepared by the station's culinary staff according to his mother's recipes, and each day, the hatchlings grew more comfortable with his presence. The emerald hatchling, whom Miles had begun calling Ember, showed the most dramatic change. By the 3rd day, Ember would stay by Miles' side throughout his visits, occasionally allowing brief touches and even climbing onto the rock beside him during feeding times. The other hatchlings, while still more cautious, had stopped hiding when Miles entered and would approach within touching distance to receive their food. Their physical condition is improving dramatically, Dr. Voss reported during the daily briefing at the end of the week. Body weights have increased by an average of 12%, flame production has stabilized, and stress hormone levels have decreased to within normal parameters. Director Carvin nodded with satisfaction. And the bonding progress. Tix brought up a holographic display showing comparative neural scans. The synchronized patterns between Mr. Harper and the emerald specimen, Ember, have increased in frequency and duration. While still rudimentary, they show classic early-stage Pyrillian bonding signatures. In plain language, Miles asked, "What does that mean?" Dr. Voss's 4 eyes blinked in sequence before she answered. "It means that you and Ember are developing a genuine empathic connection. The neural translator is registering more complex emotional exchanges, and our instruments detect synchronization even when you're not in direct contact." Miles nodded, not entirely surprised. He had begun experiencing odd moments throughout his days, sudden flashes of emotion that didn't seem to be his own, brief sensations of curiosity or contentment that came from nowhere. And occasionally, when he was with Ember, he could almost sense what the hatchling wanted or intended before it acted. The other hatchlings are also showing interest in potential bonding, Tix added, though none as pronounced as Ember. They appear to be waiting, observing the primary bond formation before committing themselves. Typical hierarchical behavior for a Pyrillian clutch, Dr. Voss confirmed. The dominant hatchling bonds first, establishing the pattern for the others to follow. Director Carvin leaned forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Miles. "Mr. Harper, the Pyrillian ambassador will be arriving in 2 weeks to inspect the hatchling's condition. Your progress has exceeded all expectations, but we need to understand exactly what is happening here." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We need to know why you, specifically, have succeeded where all our specialists failed." Miles shrugged uncomfortably. "I honestly don't know, sir. I just treated them like living creatures who were scared and hungry, not like scientific specimens." "Perhaps," suggested Tix, "it is precisely that approach which made the difference. Our specialists approached the problem with clinical detachment, while Mr. Harper offered something more personal." Dr. Voss nodded thoughtfully. "The sandwiches. What about them?" Miles asked. "They were made by hand, with ingredients that carry strong sensory associations for you," Dr. Voss explained. "Our analysis shows they contain compounds that trigger memory and emotional centers in the human brain, what you might call comfort food. Perhaps the hatchlings sensed those emotional resonances." "You mean they smelled my feelings?" Miles asked incredulously. "Pyrillians are known to possess heightened olfactory sensitivity to emotional states," Tix confirmed. "It's part of their bonding process. They may have detected something in your food, and by extension, in you, that signaled safety and care rather than clinical observation." Director Carvin stood abruptly, his decision made. "Continue the current protocols. Mr. Harper will work with the hatchlings daily, focusing on strengthening the initial bond with the emerald specimen while encouraging the others to follow suit. Dr. Voss, I want comprehensive documentation of every interaction, every neural synchronization event, every feeding response." He turned to Miles with unexpected intensity. "Mr. Harper, you have inadvertently become crucial to an interstellar diplomatic situation of the highest importance. The success or failure of your bond with these hatchlings could determine the future relationship between the Pyrillian Dominion and the Interstellar Alliance." Miles felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "No pressure, then," he muttered. As the days passed, Miles' bond with Ember grew stronger, and the other hatchlings began showing clearer signs of pre-bonding behavior. The blue-scaled one, which Miles had named Sapphire, had taken to perching on nearby rocks during his visits, watching intently as Miles and Ember interacted. A rust-colored hatchling, dubbed Rusty, would often approach while Miles was working on habitat maintenance, observing his tools with apparent fascination. 2 weeks after that first encounter, Miles sat cross-legged in the center of the habitat, no longer requiring the protective suit as the hatchlings had stopped showing any aggressive behavior toward him. Ember lay curled beside him, head resting lightly against his thigh as Miles carefully examined the hatchling's wing membranes, which were finally beginning to expand properly now that Ember was eating regularly. "You're going to be flying before too long," Miles murmured, gently stretching the delicate membrane between his fingers. "Another few weeks of good food and exercise, and these wings will be strong enough to lift you." Ember made a soft trilling sound that the neural translator interpreted as pleasure, anticipation, trust. Miles had grown accustomed to these emotional translations and had begun to recognize the hatchling's various vocalizations even without the translator's help. Each had a distinct personality emerging. Ember was bold and curious, Sapphire thoughtful and observant, rusty mechanical and methodical. The other three, a silver-scaled hatchling Miles called Sterling, a purple-tinged one named Violet, and a gold-flecked black one dubbed Onyx, were developing their own unique traits as well. Mr. Harper, Dr. Voss's voice came through his earpiece, interrupting his thoughts. Could you come to the observation room when you've finished? There's something we need to discuss. Miles carefully set Ember aside, earning a protesting chirp. I'll be back soon, he promised, scratching under Ember's chin in the spot he'd discovered the hatchling enjoyed most. Be good while I'm gone. In the observation room, Miles found not only Dr. Voss and Tix, but Director Carvin and several other high-ranking station officials he hadn't met before. Their serious expressions immediately put him on alert. What's happened? He asked, looking from face to face. Dr. Voss stepped forward. We've received an urgent communication from the Pyrillian ambassador. She will be arriving tomorrow, a week ahead of schedule. Miles felt his stomach tighten. Why the rush? Director Carvin's jaw clenched visibly before he answered. It seems word of your unusual success with the hatchlings has reached the Pyrillian Dominion. They are, to put it mildly, intensely interested in how a human maintenance worker has achieved what their briefing documents explicitly stated would be impossible for non-Pyrillians. The implication, Dr. Voss added carefully, is that they suspect we may have withheld information about human psychic capabilities in previous diplomatic exchanges. But humans don't have psychic abilities, Miles protested. At least, I certainly don't. Tix clicked his mandibles nervously. Nevertheless, the ambassador is bringing a Pyrillian truth-seer to evaluate the situation. They will want to examine you directly. Miles ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. Examine how exactly? The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances before Dr. Voss answered. A Pyrillian truth-seer can detect falsehoods and surface thoughts through direct mental contact. It's considered invasive by most species standards. Great, Miles muttered. Mind-reading dragons. Just what I needed. Director Carvin stepped closer, his imposing presence softened slightly by what appeared to be genuine concern. Mr. Harper, I want to be clear about something. You have done nothing wrong. Quite the opposite. Your connection with these hatchlings has potentially saved a diplomatic crisis. However, the Pyrillians are extremely protective of their dragons and deeply suspicious of any unexpected development regarding them. What the director is trying to say, Dr. Voss interjected more bluntly, is that the Pyrillians may not be pleased to find a human forming a bond with their hatchlings, regardless of how beneficial it has been for the creature's health. Miles thought of Ember and the other hatchlings, how they had gone from terrified, starving creatures to curious, increasingly confident young dragons in just 2 weeks. He thought of the strange warmth that filled him whenever Ember touched his hand, the growing sense that he could almost feel what the hatchling was feeling. What happens if they disapprove? He asked quietly. The silence that followed told Miles everything he needed to know. I see, he said finally. They could take them away. It is their right, Director Carvin acknowledged reluctantly. The hatchlings remain Pyrillian property under our care, not our possession. Miles nodded slowly, his jaw set with determination. Then we'd better make sure they see that the hatchlings are thriving under the current arrangement. The Pyrillian diplomatic vessel arrived with surprisingly little fanfare. A sleek, organic-looking craft that docked at Nexus 7's diplomatic bay without the usual ceremonial protocols. Miles, dressed in a formal uniform hastily provided by station administration rather than his usual mechanic's jumpsuit, stood alongside Director Carvin, Dr. Voss, and Tix as the airlock cycled open. The Pyrillian ambassador was not what Miles had expected. Rather than the imposing, dragon-like entity he had imagined, Ambassador Celera was a humanoid figure with iridescent scales similar to the hatchlings covering her face and visible on her hands. She stood slightly taller than the average human, with an elegant bearing and piercing golden eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the welcoming committee. Behind her came a larger, more intimidating figure, clearly the truth-seer. This Pyrillian appeared more draconic, with an elongated face, prominent eye ridges, and scaled hands that ended in sharp claws. Unlike the ambassador's political uniform, the truth-seer wore simple robes of deep purple that seemed to shimmer with subtle patterns when they moved. Ambassador Celera, Director Carvin began formally. On behalf of Galactic Station Nexus 7 and the Interstellar Alliance, we welcome you and Truthseer Korath to our facility. The ambassador inclined her head slightly. Director Carvin, I appreciate the welcome, but let us dispense with formalities. I am here for one purpose only, to understand what has transpired with our hatchlings. Her golden eyes fixed on Miles with unsettling intensity. Is this the human? Miles felt a strange pressure in his mind as the ambassador studied him. Nothing invasive, but a definite sense of being evaluated on a level beyond the physical. Yes, Ambassador, Director Carvin confirmed. This is Miles Harper, the station mechanic who has established contact with the hatchlings. The Truthseer spoke for the first time, his voice a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate in Miles' chest. A mechanic? How unexpected. He stepped closer to Miles, studying him with unblinking eyes. You claim to have bonded with Pyrelian hatchlings, human? I wouldn't put it that way, sir, Miles answered carefully. I just found a way to help them eat and feel safe. The scientists are the ones calling it a bond. Ambassador Solara's eyes narrowed slightly. An interesting distinction. You deny the bond. No, Miles said, finding unexpected firmness in his voice. I don't deny that there's some kind of connection between me and the hatchlings, especially Ember, the emerald-scaled one. I just don't pretend to understand what it is or how it happened. The Truthseer made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Honesty. Refreshing. He turned to Ambassador Solara. He speaks truth as he perceives it. Surface perceptions can be deceiving. The ambassador replied coolly. I wish to see these hatchlings immediately. As they walked toward the xenobiology sector, Miles felt increasingly nervous. What if the hatchlings reacted badly to the Pyrelians? What if they showed fear or aggression? Or worse, what if they abandoned their newfound trust in him to bond with members of their own kind? Dr. Voss must have sensed his anxiety, for she fell into step beside him. The hatchlings have formed their initial attachments to you, Mr. Harper, she said quietly. That won't change simply because Pyrelians are present. In fact, your bond may be the only thing that keeps them calm during this inspection. When they reached the observation room, Ambassador Solara stepped immediately to the window. The hatchlings were visible in various parts of the habitat. Ember perched on the central rock where Miles usually sat, the others scattered around in what had become their usual activities of exploration and play. They appear healthy, the ambassador acknowledged, studying them with a professional eye. Better than I expected, given the reports of their condition 2 weeks ago. Mr. Harper has been instrumental in their recovery, Dr. Voss explained, bringing up holographic displays of the hatchlings' medical data. As you can see, all biological markers have improved dramatically since he began working with them. They're eating regularly, demonstrating normal social behaviors, and showing appropriate developmental progress. The Truthseer had moved to stand directly behind Miles, close enough that Miles could feel the Pyrelian's breath on the back of his neck. How did you achieve this, human? What method did you employ that our own experts deemed impossible? Miles swallowed, acutely aware of the Truthseer's scrutiny. Honestly, a grilled cheese sandwich with ham and spicy mustard. There was a moment of stunned silence before the Truthseer let out a sound that was definitely a laugh this time. Explain, Miles did, recounting how he had accidentally interrupted the crisis meeting with his lunch, how the hatchlings had responded to the aroma, and how he had gradually earned their trust through food and patience. A most unlikely solution, Ambassador Solara commented when he finished. Yet the results speak for themselves. She turned to Director Carvin. I wish to observe Mr. Harper interacting with the hatchlings directly. Miles entered the habitat as he had dozens of times over the past 2 weeks, though never with such an important audience watching his every move. The moment he appeared, Ember leapt from the central rock and bounded toward him with characteristic enthusiasm, followed more cautiously by the others. Joy, recognition, belonging. The neural translator's reading was stronger than ever, and Miles could feel the emotional connection even without the device. He knelt down as Ember reached him, allowing the hatchling to climb onto his shoulder, a recent development that had delighted the scientific team as a sign of deepening trust. Hey there, Miles said softly, scratching under Ember's chin. I brought some visitors today. Important ones. Ember's head swiveled toward the observation window, nostrils flaring as the hatchling caught the scent of the Pyrelians. There was a moment of tension as Ember studied the unfamiliar figures, then a curious chirp. Confusion. Recognition. Question. The other hatchlings had gathered around Miles, forming a protective semicircle as they too noticed the Pyrelians. Miles could feel their collective unease, a ripple of uncertainty spreading through the group. "It's okay," he assured them, projecting calm confidence as strongly as he could. "They're your people, in a way. They want to make sure you're doing well." In the observation room, Ambassador Celera watched this interaction with growing astonishment. "The empathic resonance is unmistakable," she murmured to the Truth Seer. "They respond to his emotional state as if he were a clutch guardian." "More than that," the Truth Seer replied, his voice equally low. "Observe the Emerald One. There is a true bond forming there, primitive but genuine." The ambassador's expression grew troubled. "How is this possible? Humans have no recorded psychic abilities." "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Voss, who had been monitoring the neural translation data, "we have been defining psychic abilities too narrowly." The hatchlings seemed to respond strongly to Mr. Harper's emotional resonance, particularly the sensory-emotional associations connected to his food. Ambassador Celera turned to her sharply. "Explain." Dr. Voss brought up another holographic display. "We analyzed the sandwich that initially attracted the hatchlings. It contains compounds that trigger strong emotional and memory responses in the human brain, what humans call comfort food. Our theory is that the hatchlings detected these emotional resonances through their olfactory systems." "Impossible," the ambassador dismissed. "Hatchlings cannot process alien emotional signatures without established neural pathways. Unless," the Truth Seer interjected thoughtfully, "those emotional signatures were somehow compatible on a fundamental level." He studied Miles through the window with new interest. "Request permission to probe the human's mind directly." Miles, unaware of this conversation, continued interacting with the hatchlings. He had brought a small pouch of treats, specially prepared by the station's culinary staff based on his sandwich recipes, but formulated to meet the hatchlings' nutritional needs. One by one, he offered morsels to each hatchling, maintaining the feeding hierarchy they had established. When he reached Sapphire, the blue-scaled hatchling surprised him by placing a clawed foot on his hand before taking the treat, a gesture remarkably similar to what Ember had done during their first encounter. Miles felt a brief flicker of that same warm connection he had experienced with Ember, though fainter. Offering. Consideration. Potential. "Well, hello to you too," Miles said softly, holding still as Sapphire maintained the contact for several seconds longer than necessary. "Thinking about upgrading our relationship, are you?" In the observation room, alarms suddenly chimed on Tix's console. "Secondary bond formation initializing with the blue specimen," he reported excitedly. "Neural synchronization at 15% and climbing." Ambassador Celera stepped closer to the window, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. "This is unprecedented. Multiple bonds with a non-Pyrelian?" "Mr. Harper," came Director Carvin's voice through Miles' earpiece, "the Pyrelians have requested direct contact with you and the hatchlings. Are you comfortable with that?" Miles glanced at the window, then at the hatchlings gathered around him. "If they are. But tell them to move slowly and let the hatchlings approach them, not the other way around." A few minutes later, the habitat airlock cycled open, and Ambassador Celera entered, followed by the Truth Seer. The hatchlings immediately tensed, drawing closer to Miles in a defensive formation that spoke volumes about their trust in him. "Stay calm," Miles murmured to them. "It's okay." The ambassador and Truth Seer stopped several meters away, making no attempt to approach further. They spoke quietly in their own language, a series of melodious sounds interspersed with deeper tones that Miles couldn't begin to interpret. Ember, perched firmly on Miles' shoulder, made a questioning sound. "Uncertainty. Protection. Query. They're your kind," Miles explained quietly. "They want to understand why you like me so much." The Truth Seer's eyes fixed on Miles. "You speak to them as if they understand complex language." Miles shrugged his free shoulder. "Maybe they don't understand the words, but they get the meaning, the feelings behind them." "Indeed," the Truth Seer said, taking a careful step forward. "Human, I must examine the nature of your bond with these hatchlings. This will require direct mental contact. Do I have your permission? Miles hesitated, looking at the hatchlings who were watching the exchange intently. Will it hurt them? Or change anything between us? The truth seer shook his head. I will only observe the existing connections, not alter them. Miles nodded slowly. All right then. Prepare yourself, the truth seer warned. This may be disorienting. Before Miles could ask what that meant, he felt a presence in his mind. Gentle but undeniably alien, like a cool breeze blowing through his thoughts. Images flashed before his mind's eye. His mother making grilled cheese sandwiches on rainy days. His father teaching him to repair an old combustion engine. The first time he'd set foot on Nexus 7, overwhelmed by the diversity of alien life. And most recently, the moment Ember had first touched his hand, that spark of connection that had changed everything. The presence moved through these memories like water, not disturbing them, but simply flowing past, taking note of the emotions attached to each. Comfort, pride, wonder, and a growing sense of belonging that had centered around the emerald hatchling. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the mental touch withdrew. Miles blinked, finding the truth seer watching him with an expression of profound surprise. Extraordinary, the Pyrillian murmured. Ambassador, you must see this. Ambassador Celera stepped forward, her golden eyes seeking Miles' permission. When he nodded, she too reached out mentally, though her touch was lighter, more focused on the connections between Miles and the hatchlings rather than his memories. When she withdrew, she looked genuinely shaken. How is this possible? She asked, though the question seemed directed at the truth seer rather than Miles. It appears, the truth seer said slowly, that humans possess a form of emotional resonance that our scientists have never detected, subtle enough to escape our instruments, but powerful enough to forge connections with empathically sensitive species like our dragons. Ember, seemingly sensing the importance of the moment, made a decisive chirp and leaped from Miles' shoulder to the ground. With deliberate movements, the hatchling approached the ambassador, stopping just before her and sitting back on its haunches in a formal posture that Miles had never seen before. Ambassador Solara's eyes widened. The declaration posture, she whispered. It's declaring allegiance to the human while acknowledging our presence. One by one, the other hatchlings moved to form a semicircle behind Ember, each assuming a similar posture. The message was clear even to Miles. They had made their choice. The ambassador and truth seer conferred quietly in their own language for several minutes, occasionally glancing at Miles and the hatchlings. Finally, Ambassador Celera turned to address him directly. Mr. Harper, what has happened here is without precedent in our recorded history. These hatchlings have formed primary bonds with a non-Pyrillian, bonds that Truth Seer Korath confirms are genuine and healthy. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Under normal circumstances, we would immediately transfer the hatchlings to Pyrillian care to ensure proper development of their abilities. Miles felt his heart sink, though he tried not to let his dismay show to the hatchlings. However, the ambassador continued, these circumstances are far from normal. The hatchlings are thriving under your care in a way that defies all our expectations. To separate them from you now would likely cause significant trauma and potentially permanent developmental harm. Miles looked up in surprise. You mean, the Pyrillian Dominion hereby officially recognizes your bond with these hatchlings and grants you the status of Clutch Guardian, Ambassador Celera announced formally. You will be provided with all necessary training and resources to raise them properly, under the joint supervision of Pyrillian experts and the station's xenobiology team. The Truth Seer stepped forward. This decision is not made lightly, human. It represents a significant shift in Pyrillian policy and opens new possibilities for interspecies relations that we had not previously considered. Miles felt a wave of relief and joy wash over him, emotions that were immediately reflected by the hatchlings as they sensed his reaction. Ember let out a triumphant trill and bounded back to him, climbing up his arm to nuzzle against his neck. Joy, belonging, rightness. Thank you, Miles said sincerely. I promise I'll do everything I can to take care of them properly. Ambassador Solara's formal demeanor softened slightly. I believe you will, Mr. Harper. In fact, if I may speak candidly, I suspect that your emotional resonance may provide these hatchlings with something our own trainers cannot. A different perspective, a unique connection that may help them develop in unexpected and valuable ways. Director Carvin, who had been watching the exchange through the observation window, entered the habitat with barely contained excitement. Ambassador Celera, this is a historic moment for interspecies relations. The Interstellar Alliance would be honored to establish a permanent Pyrelian liaison office on Nexus 7 to facilitate this unprecedented arrangement. A wise suggestion, Director, the ambassador agreed. I will recommend such an establishment to the matriarchs immediately. She turned back to Miles. Mr. Harper, you have inadvertently become a figure of significant diplomatic importance. Your success with these hatchlings opens new possibilities for cooperation between our peoples. Miles looked down at the hatchlings gathered around him. 6 young dragons who had gone from terrified and dying to confident and thriving in just 2 weeks, all because of a chance encounter and a simple sandwich. I'm still just a mechanic, he said, scratching Ember under the chin. A mechanic with some very unusual friends. The Truth Seer made that rumbling laugh again. Perhaps that is precisely why you succeeded where our specialists failed. Sometimes, Mr. Harper, the simplest solutions are invisible to those looking for complexity. In the months that followed, Miles' life transformed dramatically. He was given new quarters adjacent to an expanded habitat for the growing hatchlings, along with a dual appointment as both a station mechanic, his insistence, and the official guardian of the Pyrelian clutch. The hatchlings continued to thrive under his care, developing faster than Pyrelian experts had predicted and showing unusual abilities that fascinated the xenobiologists. Ember, the first to bond with Miles, developed a telepathic connection strong enough that they could share not just emotions, but simple thoughts and images. The others formed their own unique bonds, Sapphire showing an uncanny ability to sense mechanical problems before they occurred, much to Miles' delight. Rusty developing extraordinary flame control, Sterling demonstrating advanced telekinetic abilities, Violet showing remarkable empathic sensitivity to other species, and Onyx exhibiting unprecedented stealth capabilities. Word spread throughout the Interstellar Alliance about the human mechanic who had bonded with Pyrelian dragons over a sandwich, leading to increased human-Pyrelian cooperation and the discovery that certain humans did indeed possess a form of emotional resonance that could forge connections with empathically sensitive species. Miles Harper, who had once been just another maintenance worker on a remote space station, found himself at the center of a diplomatic and scientific revolution, all because he'd interrupted a crisis meeting with his lunch. 6 months after that fateful day, Miles sat on the edge of the station's largest observation deck, legs dangling over a transparent floor that offered a breathtaking view of the nebula below. Beside him sat Ember, now the size of a large dog and growing rapidly, with wings finally strong enough for short flights within the expanded habitat. Contentment, wonder, belonging. Yeah, Miles agreed, feeling the emotions flowing through their bond. Pretty amazing view, isn't it? Ember's telepathic voice, still developing but growing clearer each day, formed in Miles' mind. Not the view. Us. Together. Right. Miles smiled, resting a hand on Ember's emerald scales, feeling the warmth and the now familiar pulse of their connection. Right indeed, he murmured. Who would have thought a grilled cheese sandwich could change the galaxy? Ember made the trilling sound that Miles had come to recognize as dragon laughter. Humans. Always surprising. That's us. Miles agreed, watching the swirling colors of the nebula below. Full of surprises. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.